nonprofit organization that provides experiences that inspire character, civility, and community. Youth Frontiers has impacted more than 2 million youth, educators, and community members, and has received national acclaim because of its powerful programs. Joe also leads Youth Frontiers' newest division, Leadership Frontiers, which focuses on inspiring character-driven leaders in all sectors. Joe's been featured on local, regional, and national media programs, including a 90-minute PBS television special titled Respectfully, Joe Cavanaugh. Additionally, he has been recognized by the late General Colin Powell of America's Promise as America's leader in our nation's efforts to rescue America's young people. Joe received his BA degree in Humanities from St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota, where he also was given an honorary doctorate in 2016. He was also named Social Entrepreneur of the Year by St. John's in 2012. Joe and his wife Jane live in Edina, Minnesota. Their daughter Tess is attending the College of St. Benedict in St. Joseph, Minnesota. Would you please give them a Golden Valley Rotary welcome? Welcome. And I suggest you use the mic. I know you're not going to be running through a PowerPoint.
I actually, if I speak like this, can you hear me okay? Oh, for the recording?
If you use your teacher voice, we'll be fine.
I can use the mic, but
whatever you're
I'm
comfortable
just
with.
a little more intimate if I. Okay, good. Is that okay?
Well,
Sure.
go for it.
Go for it. Go for it, Brian. Thank you. Thank you. So you mentioned that I spoke at the Nobel Peace Prize Forum. My mom, who she's Italian, she has a lot of positive feelings for her Italian son. She thought that me speaking there meant that I had won the Nobel Peace Prize. So I, being the oldest son, I did not have the heart to tell her that I didn't win the prize. So she went through the rest of her life, even when she passed away, thinking that her son was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So I didn't have the heart to tell her. She would run on, my son won the Nobel Peace Prize. And my brothers and sisters were like, Mom, he didn't win. Oh, yes, he did, yes, he did. It was 12 years ago. 12 years ago, I was in New York City. I was with my daughter, Tess. She was 7 years old at the time. Daddy-daughter trip. My daughter and I are really close. I was showing her the big buildings, Rockefeller Plaza, all the sights and scenes of New York, and her eyes were this big. And I decided to take Tess into the bowels underneath the city streets to show her how the subway system worked. And we walked down the steps. If you've been in New York, you know, you go down those steps with the green bulb, and you walk down up to the ticket counter. And there's that glass booth. And the guy behind the ticket counter didn't look up, but must have seen us walking up, and he just did this. How old's your daughter? I looked at him, I said, my daughter's 7. He pointed to the sign on the window that said, children under 5 are free. And again, he looks now up at me. How old's your daughter? As he's pointing to the sign. I go, my daughter's 7. Now he said something. He, in an annoyed look and voice, he says, children under 5 are free. I look at him, and I look down at my daughter Tess, and she's looking up at me. And I go, my daughter's 7. He rolls his eyes. I paid the $2.25 subway fare, a cheap ticket, a priceless lesson in character, The Greek philosopher Heraclitus, I always like to quote Heraclitus, as a philosophy student at St. John's. I think it's impressive even to say the name, so I like to quote him. Thousands of years ago, Heraclitus said, "Character is destiny." Character is our children's destiny. I want to just begin this time together thanking you, thanking Rotary for what you do. The 4 ways. The 4 ways are the thread that can reweave our destiny. The Rotarian 4 ways. And I especially love the one about truth. Truth is the thread that weaves together community. Without truth, there is no trust. Without trust, there is no community. And I'm not saying be committed to your truth. It's not about I must speak my truth, which is the common frame we hear a lot of people saying or shouting or spending $1.98 on a piece of white poster board from Target saying, I must speak my truth. It's really about pursuing what is true, which is very different than my truth. It's the weaving together of all of us, not just one. Youth Frontiers, organization that I get to work with. Sarah, myself, and many, many other great, amazing people in our community and in the Midwest. We're a nonprofit. We've been in existence for 37 years now. I'm dating myself as I was there day one. We have worked with over 2 million young people since we began in 1987. Worked with Purpose, worked with White Bear Lake Schools, worked with teachers there. When the pandemic hit, we were at about a $5 to $6 million company, working with over 100,000 students a year. The pandemic really made us overnight become Blockbuster. We work with schools, Strike One. We do large group gatherings with 200 kids in a room with their arms around each other, sweating and spitting out as they sing the song, Lean on Me at the top of their lungs, Strike Two. We're 0-2 in the count. We were going for a walk that summer, and I said to my wife, Jane, I opened the doors 30-some years ago. It looks like I'm going to be closing the doors now. And she said, Joe, the great philosopher Picasso once said, when you don't have red, you got to use blue. And if you're a painter or know of Picasso's great work, that began his greatest period called his blue period for 5 years. When he ran out of red, had to use blue. So, all right, let's start adapting or we die. And we started painting with blue. Now we work with much more than just schools, nonprofits, faith communities, businesses, corporations. But it's still all about the message. Character is destiny. I'm now in my 60s. Might be the oldest person in here. Is anyone else in my 60s? Going? I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna go in. I'm the old one in here, so give me some respect. For those of you that aren't 60 yet, you won't maybe get this. Those of us that are 60 and older will get it. I no longer lie now that I'm in my 60s. Now people say, Joe, you won the Nobel Peace Prize. I I've never really done bald-faced lies, but I also work for a nonprofit, and sometimes I'll say things that maybe aren't completely true. You look lovely today, Mrs. Cleaver. But now I'm not saying anything anymore that I know isn't true. I might not always say what I think is true. That's called wisdom. Is it already in the front? Is it me?
It's you.
It's me.
I wish I could stay.
He didn't throw the tomato.
Did you eat the tomato? Oh. Good to see you. Thanks, Lord. I might not say all the time what I think is true, which I said is really about wisdom. But I won't say something that I know is not true anymore. I don't care anymore if people get uncomfortable when I point to something that I believe is true. And for a people pleaser that works in a nonprofit, that's not easy for me. If you want me to share right now and are looking for a speaker at this Rotary, and I love speaking to Rotaries because of who you are. But if you're looking for someone to share stuff right now that's a talk about good news, you brought in the wrong person to speak. There's someone that's talking about that downstairs in the room. I've worked with kids for my entire life. First at a church, and the last 37 years at Youth Frontiers. 2 million plus kids. Things are not good for kids today. We have created some of our painting in blue. The last couple of years, created a parent academy. I'll tell you about it in a little bit. To support and help parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles in helping raise this generation of kids. Because it ain't a good time to raise kids. I start out my parent academy saying, this might be the worst time to ever raise a kid that I have ever known in my entire life, and maybe before. Kids are building their houses, and we are helping kids, even worse, build their houses on sand. The philosophy of postmodernism, of deconstructionism, it's best expressed by Eugene Peterson, the theologian, who said, we are over-focused on three things. Our children's obsession with their holy needs, their holy wants, and their holy feelings, versus timeless character traits and truth and wisdom. And when we get that mixed up, it leads to emptiness and nihilism. Nothing matters. Nihilism. And how does this impact kids? Well, the data is overwhelming, if you believe in data. anxiety, and depression have skyrocketed. It's epidemic. 61%, remember that stat, 61% of young people today now describe themselves as seriously lonely. Things are not good. Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, and most recently, The Anxious Generation, has said this: we are now raising and setting up this generation for failure. There's an old Lakota story about a child that comes to one of the elders in the tribe and says, I want to do good things and I want to do bad things. Why is that? Why do I want to do good things and bad things? Well, the elder says, well, each of us, we have two dogs at war inside of us, and they're constantly fighting. They're constantly fighting for control of your soul. Well, the child says, well, what dog's going to win? What dog's going to win the battle for my soul? The elder says in their wisdom, the dog that you feed will win.
Don't you hear that?
The dog that you feed will win. We are feeding young people a lot of Purina bad chow. Social media, it's all about compare and despair. And it affects young girls at a 2x factor over boys. Boys are into video games, girls are into social media. Comparing, despairing constantly. This is killing kids emotionally, spiritually, and just as tragically physically. Safe spaces. The creation of spaces that no longer challenge people and always want them to be comfortable. But what does that do? It creates fragile and weak people. Athletes know that. You do not get strong by sitting in the whirlpool. You need to be challenged, and you need to face adversity and uncomfortableness. And then the third thing, this Purina bad chow, way too many gold medals. Which, what does that lead to? Narcissism. Comparing and despairing, fragility, becoming weak, and narcissism. The antidote? Character. Character is our young people's destiny. Character is a person's destiny. Character is your destiny. Character is a community's destiny. Character is our nation's destiny. What's needed? The 4 ways. Rotary is needed. What's needed? Preparing kids for the road, not preparing the road for kids. There's a big difference. Why? Why is this important? Because life is difficult. The 3 words that M. Scott Peck wrote in The Road Less Traveled. Life is difficult. And the next sentence said, the sooner you understand that, the easier life becomes. We need to prepare young people with the tools of character to walk the road of life. With all the pitfalls, with all the challenges, with all the boulders that they have to step over. To let young people know that they have what it takes to navigate the challenges of life. I mentioned to you the Parent Academy. What we talk about with parents are 3 things. It's Purina Good Chow. This stuff is Purina Good Chow. First is this. It's saying to young people, the first Purina serving of Good Chow is, you are strong. From the time they're 2 to the time they're 22, you are strong. You are not fragile. You may be hurt in life at times, because life brings that. But you have what it takes. When we moved into our new neighborhood, $15 years ago, Tess was 5, starting kindergarten. First 2 weeks in the neighborhood, there were 2 girls in our neighborhood, a couple years older than Tess. Tess was 5, they were 7 and 8. I won't mention their names. But Sarah and Kelly, I just think about it, sorry, I didn't need to mention their names. They were doing a little bit of the neighborhood, who's the toughest, who's in charge, who are the mean girls, who's gonna show who to Tess on her first 2 weeks. And I saw them kind of running up the sidewalk as Tess and her tiny little legs. If you wouldn't imagine Tess being my daughter, she's not super tall with long legs. It's just kind of the way it is with DNA. And Tess is trying to catch up to these 2 girls, and they were bigger and faster than Tess. And so they were running ahead of her, kind of doing that laugh and you know, ha ha, ha ha, ha ha, you can't catch us. And I was looking at this out the window. Being Italian, I wanted to run out the window and solve that problem. I chose not to. And I saw Tess when she got in front of her house, she gave up chasing after them. And she started to walk up the walkway to her front door. And she came up to the door, and I opened the door. And she walked in the house, kind of like this. And I said, Tess, I saw what was happening on the sidewalk. And she did one of these 5-year-old. I go, that must have hurt. And she did this. I go, you know what happens when you get hurt? You take big breaths, 3 big breaths. Research shows if you take 3 slow, deep breaths, it lowers your emotional amygdala, the brain chemicals. And sometimes it takes 10 deep breaths, but usually 3. That's our theme with Tess. Let's go. 1, 2, another one. Good. Hold it in. Another one. By the 3rd breath, she started to calm a little bit. I said, Tess, I saw what happened out on the sidewalk. And I looked at her and I said, I'm glad that happened to you. And she did this. What kind of dad would say that? I said, I'm glad that happened to you, Tess. Because now you know what never to do to a kid on the playground. If you meet my 19-year-old daughter, you will meet the most compassionate human being I've ever met. You will also meet one of the toughest, I'll say bad butts, that I know. You don't mess with her. But if you're Finn in her elementary school who has cerebral palsy in the motorized wheelchair, Tess was the kid. When all the kids at lunch run ahead down the hallway to the lunchroom, Tess would walk slowly with Finn to the lunchroom. You see, pain and adversity can create a sense of purpose in young people's lives. And when we strip them of the difficulties in life, we strip them of some of the greatest lessons in life. It's about helping young people learn to be uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is not a bad thing. Second, serving a Purina good chow. Saying to young people, you have a last name. When I'm standing in front of 200 ninth graders, I don't that much anymore because of my gray beard and graying hair, but I still love to do it. I'll say to them, hey, ninth graders, it ain't about you. You have a first name, but you also have a last name. And your behavior, the way you live your life, it doesn't just affect you. It affects your moms and dads and aunts and uncles and grandparents and brothers and sisters and teachers in the school and neighbors in your school, in our community. It ain't just about you. You have a last name. It's the character trait of responsibility. To use your abilities to respond to the needs of others. My Jewish friends use the words tikkun olam, to heal the world. We've given young people much. It's not too much to ask for things in return. I tell parents, don't always ask your kids what they want to be when they get older. That's a narcissistic first name question. Maybe you should say this: what are you going to do to make the world better when you get older? Maybe that's the shift we need to be saying more to our grandkids, to our kids, to our nieces and nephews. And the third, serving a Purina good chow, is making sure at the foundation our kids know they are loved, not worshipped, that they're precious, not perfect, because there's a big difference. For the theologians in here, it's pretty simple. God is God, and you're not. First commandment. And when we mix those two words up, loving and worshiping, precious and perfect, we start raising a generation of kids that think they're perfect. They think theologically that they're God. And when that happens, bad things happen. When we have leaders, or we have people in our lives that think they're perfect, or that they are God, and that they know it all, bad things happen. And we've seen it happen in our society and in history when we no longer listen to anyone that might disagree with us. We shout them down if they think differently. And we start to stay on our extremes politically or societally, and we no longer listen to anyone that might be in the middle or on the other. And when we are certain that we know it all and that we are always right, it gives us license to do anything to those that are wrong. We saw it in the concentration camps. We saw it in the internment camps in this country. We saw it in the gulags. We saw it in the killing fields. Finish with a quote from the Lord of the Rings, Gandalf, the long-bearded gray wizard, who said to Frodo, I almost said the elf. Long movie. He said this: it's a dangerous business, Frodo, when you go out of your door, the front door, You step on the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. Thank you for giving and holding the four ways. It gives all of us, our children and our community, it gives us a foundation to walk on. It gives us something to build our lives on. Character. The price is not cheap, but it's a ticket that must be paid for. I have 1 minute left. I'm gonna tear you apart. Should I stand up here for 60 seconds, or do you have something to say?
I say we give him a round of applause.